Hello, can you hear me?
I got you.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. Good to hear from you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I was just hoping to interview you about hard work and ambition for a essay I'm writing and get your take on some of these ideas.
Cool. I was excited to read through your list of questions. There were some good ones.
Yeah. All right, so we could just get started. Could you tell me about the transformation you've seen with some of your athletes?
Yeah. So I actually like the word transformation because I think that's more and more where my mind goes. It's like I don't really want to work with a player that's just kind of refining things a little bit. I want to work with
Yeah.
players that are kind of just coming out of beginner stage and really love basketball and want to go somewhere serious, like playing high school varsity basketball. And it's what makes the work fun. Um, So I guess I found most players in that sixth, seventh, eighth grade age group are not really performing in games the way they want to. They know they're pretty good in practice. Their parents and their coaches kind of see their potential, but they kind of freeze up in games and they're not really doing what they're capable of. And so I think it's somewhat due to an overemphasis on how practice is structured. Um, Youth rec leagues, especially, is like typically we're doing isolated skills or we're doing 5-on-5 games and scrimmages and practice. And there's not much time spent on the middle ground in between. And so most of our work is on just connecting the dots. Like we kind of take an inverted approach in some ways where we're taking a situation and the decisions that go in that situation, we're building skills downstream from that. So instead of building skills in isolation, we're building it from the decision point down to the skill. And then the player just has a lot more context when they get to a game. They're able to kind of recognize, I've been here before. This is where this goes, and this is how I react to a defender and so forth.
Yeah, so would that look like putting a player in a scenario and then asking them what decision they would make and then having them perform that action, or how does that look in
Yeah,
practice?
I guess it's less specific to that. It's more of just letting them experience. So it's less question based and more experiential, where it's like we will like create a constrained game situation and basically let them play out of it and kind of discover the problems that they're going to run into in that situation. And then through that, we can kind of guide them. All right, here's a skill that's a solution to the problem you just experienced. And then they're like, oh, thank you for this lovely solution you have for me. Instead of what most players experience, you've probably experienced in your soccer career is, coach says, do this drill that the player has no idea how it fits into the game at all, and they're just supposed to do it because the coach said so. And
Yeah, I definitely think it's important in sports in general to have a focus on game realistic things and not just isolated training, because
yeah,
it's one thing to be able to perform alone in practice, but it's different to perform under pressure with defenders and
right. Yeah, so
outside
the more we
factors.
can kind of build that contextual environment around the skill, the more it's motivating for the player to practice because they see the purpose of it, and the more it actually translates to games. So that's to answer your question. The transformation we really make is trying to help players become ready for high school by focusing on the decision making side. That's kind of been ignored up to that point in middle school, typically.
Cool. So you have this concept of fluffy confidence versus concrete confidence. I was wondering if you could tell me about that.
Yeah, one of my favorite topics. I don't know exactly I came up with that contrast, but I've stuck with it and I really enjoy talking about that. So thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
I guess the cultural trend I see has kind of been toward the self-esteem side of confidence, where it's like, yay, Ollie, go be your best self, and we believe in you, and you're great no matter what you do. And most kids are seeing right through that. If it's not authentically, cheering them on, they're like, I just dribbled off my foot out of bounds. Like clearly, I'm not that great yet.
Yeah.
So, I guess I see the concrete confidence term as just like we're gonna prove it. We're gonna build skills and build your knowledge 7 layers deep below the skill that you're actually executing in a game. And so then confidence is like the emergent property that bubbles up at the end. Like we've done all this work. Like we've been laying bricks here for years, building all this skill set and the confidence. And it's just like, the player then is like, I know that I know that I know what to do in this situation. And so of course I'm confident. You know, they don't even consciously think about it or talk about it that way. It's more of just like, well, yeah, of course I did a Euro step and finished with my left hand because the defender was in the way. Like, what else would I do? It's become like a natural instinct kind of thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense with soccer. I've definitely seen the example of coaches telling their players to quote unquote be composed, and
Yeah,
it's not
right.
helpful because rather you need to teach the player what to do because to be
Yeah.
composed you have to be calm and understand what's going on. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot to the idea that anything is trainable, right? You can teach like the component skills that someone does to be thought of as composed. You know, it's not like confidence is a similar thing. It's like an abstract concept that's built with a lot of different pieces to it. But, you know, it really doesn't work to say, you know, be composed or just
yeah,
be more confident. It's like, okay, thanks, but I don't know what to do out here. And so I actually I built a model at one point that had aggressiveness actually at the top because that's what most parents are asking for. What most coaches want to see is like, I
yeah,
want
yeah,
our player to be more aggressive. And, you know, the middle of the pyramid, second layer is confidence because everybody kind of sees like, okay, to be aggressive, I should be confident. But then
mm,
below that, I just put certainty at the bottom of the pyramid is like, we need to know what to do with our feet and we need to know what decision to make in order to move to confidence and eventually move to aggressiveness. And I think a lot of people skip over that. And so they're like, you know, to your point of composure or aggressiveness, it's like whatever the top of their pyramid is that they're talking about as a topic is like yelling that at your player is not really going to do anything for them. We got to really build it brick by brick. And that's kind of where the whole confidence, concrete confidence term came from is building it that way and being very certain of every brick that you've placed on your pyramid.
yeah. I definitely think that sort of reverse engineering to the normal approach makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So you obviously care a lot about helping kids in life in general. So why did you choose sports as the avenue to help them other than something else like teaching?
Yeah, no, I have thought about that in the past, and I don't know. I kind of fell into it. I was playing at a pretty small time level in North Carolina as a
Yeah.
homeschool basketball player, and started coaching the middle school boys. You know, the season I graduated. So it's now 20 years. It was 2005, and you know, I was 17 going on 18, and I was coaching 13-year-olds, and you know, really just fell in love with that feeling of camaraderie and teamwork and everything else that goes into a sport. And then, you know, along the way, I did have thoughts about what else could I be using as an avenue. But really, I arrived at the conclusion just recently that, you know, my main underlying mission is to help people learn how to learn. And I just happen to use basketball as like my favorite way to do that. And, you know, one of the reasons is that it's very naturally motivating. Like, you know, if you got
Mm.
a room full of kids in a classroom and you're trying to help them learn math, it's like they might not be that motivated to actually work on
If
that,
they're not
learn
interested,
something.
yeah.
Right. And it's like, well, here's a ball and try to get it in this basket. And they're like, woohoo, let's go.
Yeah.
And you know, I had some experiences with after school programs in my past where I was working with like K through second graders, and you know, they would all come out of a classroom like boiling over with energy, and you know, I got to teach them basketball. Like my job was easy compared to, you know, what a teacher would have in a
Yeah, yeah.
classroom setting most of the time. And so, yeah, I think, you know, it's kind of that duality is that easier in a lot of ways because they're pre-motivated to want to play a sport. And I think that the aspect of being able to help them learn how to learn with something they're already motivated by just, I guess, allowed me to fall into that track pretty easily.
Yeah, yeah. I love the idea of teaching kids to or to learn how to learn because I
Yeah.
think my sort of education was very unconventional, right? I'm homeschooled and until recently I didn't do much conventional schoolwork. I kind of just pursued whatever was interesting to me, which was usually achieving higher ranks in a video game. And
Uh-huh.
then after doing all these things and trying to climb the ranks in so many different things, when I brought that into soccer, I already almost had this framework for how to improve. And that's why I think that working towards ambitious goals is so helpful because you
Yeah.
just build all this character and this skill to build skill. I think it's
Right.
great.
No, I think that's a great analogy too. Like I always like, people talk about gamifying different things, but like the video game model is like you can only go up, right? You beat a level as much as you want, but once you beat it, you make progress all the time. So it's a forward pull versus, where a lot of classroom work is, if you make a mistake, you get punished, your grade is down, or even in
Yeah.
sports, it's like you mess up, you get subbed out of the game, or you have to run sprints in practice. And so trying to stay on the positive side of that as a method and a framework to help people learn how to learn, I think is really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's really important. Well, the question is, how do you build certainty in your athletes that the practice they're doing is going to pay off? Because
Mm,
I do think kids have a hard time like doing drills if they don't think it's going to work.
yeah. No, I think that's kind of what brought me to what I mentioned earlier is that building the context first kind of solves that problem in some ways. Is like we let them experience the problem and then we're working on a solution to the problem they just experienced. And so they can connect the dots where, I think a lot of coaches get off track by saying, like you're talking about, is, here's this drill that's my favorite drill, but it has no connection to basketball whatsoever. And the players are like, really? Why should we be spending our hard-earned time, our valuable time on such a thing? And I think a lot of coaches struggle with that if they don't have a good connection to reality in a lot of ways. And then, the certainty, I talked about my base of my pyramid was certainty.
Yeah.
And, talking about really just proving it to them beyond a shadow of a doubt is kind of my approach is like, I expect them to do it. I expect them to be able to do it. I'm pretty confident that I can help them do it. And they kind of grasp onto that sense. It was like, okay, this is working and I'm seeing some success from it. And, just starting from that whole framework that they have the game situation, they know where this is going to fit in. They are now seeing why it's important, and then they're working on it and seeing success while they're doing it. And that just kind of, I guess, greases the wheels enough to where they're like, yes, I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm gonna keep working hard at it because I'm seeing the connection and I'm seeing success pretty quickly. Making
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah, I really like that idea of showing them the problem first, because I think a lot of kids, or just people in general, they'll start something and if they don't see instant results, they give up. And I think
Yeah,
showing them the problem and them understanding what problem they're fixing and how they're fixing it probably
yeah,
helps keep them motivated till they start to see those first results. Because I think it's a lot
right.
easier to stay motivated once you've seen results than it is to get the
Yeah, it
motivation in the
is.
first
And I
place.
think, as coaches, it's very easy to see the problem on a bigger scale than the players do and to skip over that part. Like, I already know what the problem is. I already know you guys are going to run into the problem. I already know you're going to need the solution. And so they skip all the way to delivering a solution without letting the players experience the problem. And I think, however brief it needs to be, like it could be one possession in a basketball game that we set up. And here's the problem, and boom, they run into it, they see it, they experience it as, as realistic as they can in a game scenario. And then, then our job as easy as coaches is like, well, here's a solution to that problem. And
Yeah.
really makes them naturally motivated to work on it, which just helps everything.
Yeah, yeah. I have a soccer coach who I think does a great job of this. Like, for instance, before we're doing a drill or after a game, he's saying, this was our problem. So this is what we're going to work on in practice. It's like,
Yeah,
we're doing this to solve this problem, not just we're doing this.
right, right.
Yeah.
And it's huge. I think the days of do it because I said so have gone out.
Yeah, yeah,
Gone out with the dinosaurs. You got to have some why behind what we're practicing to really make players motivated and engaged.
yeah. So can you tell me about how you encourage hard work among your athletes?
Yeah. So I guess the basic baseline is I don't really spend much time intentionally trying to do that. I kind
Yeah.
of let that evolve from, again, all the other contextual clues and environment we set up. But one of the phrases I came up with a couple of years ago is to have high expectations with unlimited attempts. And so basically, I'm setting the bar very high, where I think you can master this skill, but there's no limit to how many attempts it will take you to get there. So like I'm here to be patient and let you try it and guide you to how to do it better. And basically I'm so confident from having done this a lot of times with a lot of other players that my dad actually pointed out at one point that you're loaning players confidence until they get some of their own. And I think there's an
Yeah, I love
aspect
that
of that where
concept.
it's like, I have done this with 100 players in the last 10 years, and they've all mastered this skill. So I fully expect you to be able to do this. And they just kind of start to absorb that mentality. And when they have that absolute expectation for me that they not only can, but they will achieve it, and usually pretty quickly, then they just start to go along with me. And then the other thing, I've been I guess complimented is probably the word, on my patience for a lot of my coaching career because, I'm really the last person in the gym to get frustrated with, the player that's trying the skill, failing, frustrated, they might be kicking themselves mentally about failing at it several times. And I'm just like, well, put this foot here. And, they do that and they start to succeed a little bit. And then eventually I like pull them back to mastering the skill and succeeding. And so, I think that whole cycle really builds, some rapport and builds that mentality where it's like hard work is just natural, normal, expected. We
Mhm.
have a really high expectation. We don't have any punishment for mistakes. So we don't have any limit of how many tries you get before we call it quits and say you're never going to learn this skill. It's just like
Yeah.
you're here to learn this skill, and it's like why would anything else happen but you learn this skill? And so again, I think all that stacks up to where it's just like they are bought into working really, really hard and they start to get that sense of confidence or certainty that they will master this skill. And it starts to translate to other areas where, they again are learning how to learn essentially. They're learning the hard work aspect of that. And it's like,
Mhm.
if I do
Yeah.
this enough times, I will succeed. So, it doesn't matter if I fail, I'm just going to keep trying it. And I guess I really have come to enjoy, watching that process, seeing
Yeah.
players become hard workers as part of it.
Yeah, that's great. I really like the idea of when you said like you tell them just put your foot here and then when they learn to do that, I think that idea of giving players small wins along the way and breaking
Yeah.
down the skills is great because sometimes if you look at a certain skill or idea as a whole, it feels like you're making no progress, but when
Yeah.
you boil it down to smaller steps, I think that's great.
Yeah. And there's a specific framework that I adopted 8 years ago now. So I call it communication methodology, but it's called tag teach. And it's simply a way to give really precise instructions and then give really concise, precise feedback right when a skill is executed. And so I call it like zooming in is what you're talking about, where most
Hmm.
people would say, go make a layup as a total package skill. And, the player could fail on 15 different things that might cause them to miss a layup.
Yeah.
But we're just, again, going back to your be composed thing. It's like make a layup.
Hmm.
It's like, it's
Yeah.
not helping. And so, we zoom in and like, okay, your foot goes here, the dribble goes there, your elbow goes here, and your fingers do this. And like, we build like a puzzle of all these pieces by zooming in on individual chunks like that they can succeed at individually. And another big part of that is separating that from the outcome, right? We don't care if the layup goes in right now. We just want this foot to go here. And okay, yeah,
Yeah.
you got your foot there, you got your foot there, you got their foot there. Okay, now get the ball here. And okay, ball here, ball here, ball here. Yes, yes, yes. And we just stack all those up. And then suddenly they're starting to make more layups than they ever did before. And they're not worried about making mistakes and they're not worried about doing the whole package at once. We're just narrowing their focus and their attention to an achievable chunk that they can do, usually very easily. There's actually a term called the point of success that comes from tech,
Hmm.
where it's like, boil it down until they can definitely succeed at it. And it's like, it's an easy,
Yeah.
and
And then
okay,
slowly make it
at that first
more and
step, and
more.
we can
Yeah.
build it back up pretty quickly. It's just, most coaches again reach frustration too soon and are looking at too many big pieces at a time where, there's enough variable pieces of an athletic skill that they could possibly never succeed at it if you're trying to get all of them done at once when they're
Yeah.
first trying to learn, right? So yeah, there's a whole lot built into zooming in and building small pieces of a
Yeah.
skill to make it successful.
Yeah. I also really like what you said about you're almost loaning them confidence until they build that confidence themselves. Because something I've definitely seen in soccer is that certain coaches are selling their credibility
Mhm.
almost. They're selling the level they played at because
Yeah,
then the kids trust and they're loaning them their confidence, right?
yeah.
And yeah. So I
Yeah,
just
that's a great
I
point.
like that idea.
Right.
So yeah, why do you believe that getting good at sports is a productive use of time, seeing as it's not going to be a career for most of the athletes you teach and coach?
Yeah, I really like this question. My first instinct would to say, well, I don't really believe that, but I think to explain my full perspective more, I think it's a bigger scale is really how I come at this. And again, going back to my what I now think of my mission in life is helping people learn how to learn,
Yeah.
and basketball just happens to be my favorite way of getting there. And so I think the productive use of time is in following a path of progress, kind of like you talked about with video games. Like you learned how to follow a path of progress and then get some immediate feedback, which is the other great thing about video games is like, I try, fail, I get the feedback and I try a different way. And, having that approach with learning skills just accelerates things. And so I like to call it the faster feedback loop, where the faster you get more repetitions with more precise feedback, the faster you're building that puzzle really quickly. And so, anyway, I think going through the process of learning a sports skill very thoroughly leads to anyone having a sense of, well, I could learn anything. I just went through this process, 6 months or a year. I didn't know basketball, and now I'm playing on my middle school team and succeeding. And so I've got this sense of accomplishment, this sense of confidence, the sense of certainty of not only the outcome of the skill, but the process I just went through. I think more importantly, there's actually a quote from a guy I really like to follow, Alex Hermosi, who's a big time business leader. But he says the work works on you more than you work on it.
Yeah, I love that quote. That's great.
I really like that because I think that's true. Like people learning how to learn, and I think I'm filling a need in a lot of ways. Like a lot of kids that are in the average school system, learning only in a classroom where I kind
Yeah.
of differentiate. They're being educated. It's like info is being pushed at them. What we're working on is you're learning how to learn through curiosity because you really want to learn it, and you're pulling
Yeah.
more out of it because you really want it. And that just has a dramatic effect on people's mind and how they think about learning, I think, for the rest of their life. And so I really enjoy being part of that process. And I think that's kind of the bigger meta perspective about,
Yeah.
spending time on a sport, regardless if you're going to play pro or not, is like the work is working on you. You're becoming a better person and you're becoming a more curious and hopefully enthusiastic learner of whatever topic you want to pursue next when you're done with sports.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I think homeschooling is such a great option for parents who can afford to do that because it can teach your kid to learn in a much more exciting way and have a
Yeah,
good relationship with learning. Whereas a lot of kids, I think, hate learning and they hate going to school and getting this info shoved at them that they don't really care about.
yeah,
That's why I think homeschooling with you just get to learn what you want to learn about. I think it's great.
right. I think that's huge. And I think that's the reason parents really value sports is that they see that aspect. Like they see
Mhm.
the child learning how to play a sport, how to cooperate with others. Like, talk to us commonly about all the reasons they want to get good at basketball. And they really see, sports as a big piece of developing character. And they don't
Yeah.
really care. Most parents have a pretty realistic perspective. Like my son thinks he's going to be the next Jason Tatum, but I don't think he's going to make it to
Yeah, yeah.
the NBA. He's 4'11" right now. And he's learning how to play. But I think that's kind of why the whole sport industry exists the way it does, is like parents really that value coming out of their children becoming better quality humans by going through that experience.
Yeah, I it's interesting. You said the kid thinks he's going to be the next Jason Tatum. Do you think it's important to see for kids to see whatever sport or thing they're doing as a long-term option? Do you think that matters to their development?
I don't know. I actually I like to talk about it as the aspirational context. So I often talk to parents about aspirational and contextual um, context, contextual context. there's another word there, but missing. But the aspirational side is like we try to encourage and connect with, the player that says, I want to be in the NBA. And we're like, okay,
Mhm.
working backwards from there, like what do we need to do now to actually take a step toward that? Because, most humans in general leave those big aspirational goals like out there floating in space that maybe someday. And we try to
Mhm.
have a different conversation. Some kids want to just play with their friends in the park in the
Yeah.
summer. Some kids want to make it to the NBA. And so we try to really, okay, given that you're going to be an NBA player, like here's what we would be working on. And like here's an NBA level concept, an NBA level move that we're going to be working on. And, kind of use that, I guess, to drive the motivation side is like, we're not just doing this again because I thought of it yesterday and we want to do it.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
doing
yeah.
it because like this is actually how offense and defense works when you get to higher levels of play.
Yeah. Yeah, one point I'm really trying to hammer through in my essay is the stuff you said about building character through
Mm,
sports, I think. Because I think the most common counter argument I would see to my claim, which is that all people should have some sort of big goal and ambition,
mm,
is the idea of, oh, what if I fail? What if it's a waste of time? And I
yeah,
think my response to that is that you'll build character and you'll learn how to learn. So
yeah. Yeah, what I commonly say is, if you shoot for the stars and you hit the moon, then you're probably doing pretty well, right? So I think to your point, like if you have a huge aspirational goal and you fall short of it, you're probably going to fall into something way better than you would have otherwise found.
yeah, yeah.
And I think I see that proven out in a lot of ways.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why not? Like, the time's gonna pass anyway, so you may as well work towards something you want rather
Yeah,
than not. There's not a very good reason to not work towards something.
right.
Yeah, so I just have a few more questions before we end this. I was wondering if you just have any advice in general to young people regarding like hard work and ambition.
Hmm. Advice in general for hard work and ambition. Well, I guess to your point you just made is like pick a really big goal that doesn't seem possible for you right now
Mhm.
and start figuring out what are the pieces that would actually move you toward that. So there's actually a framework I got from a kind of a business coach calls dangers, opportunities, and strengths. And I like to
Mhm.
ask players and parents this as they're kind of applying to work with us. So danger is like, what is the worst case scenario right now?
Yeah.
Don't change anything, right? And then the opportunity is what's the best case scenario that you see playing out if you move toward this thing you're thinking about?
Yeah.
And then the strength is what strengths do you have already that you could leverage toward achieving this thing that you want to do? And really kind of puts people on a different track mentally of like, okay, I want to play varsity high school basketball,
Mhm.
um, but I am not very good at basketball right now. Maybe my shot's off or whatever. My danger is I'm going to miss my middle school team this fall. And so I need to work on shooting right now to make my middle school team, to put me on the track to make my varsity team. And, again, just kind of working backwards, like I talked about with the aspirational context, is like if you have a big goal and you can connect it back to today, then you just get clarity, which I think is a hugely undervalued thing in most people's lives, is like
Mhm.
absolute clarity about what I need to do right now to move toward the goal. Because
Yeah.
a lot of people have all kinds of ideas swirling around and don't know how to prioritize and don't know how to, take things down to the point where they're ready to actually take action and move forward on it. And
Yeah.
so, boiling things down like that, working backwards, like reverse engineering your goal down to what do I actually need to do with a lot of clarity so that I can decide now and then take action on it for the next six
Yeah,
months,
like
not have to think about it again.
yeah, yeah, I love that concept of smaller goals leading towards your bigger goal because that's definitely sort of how I approach soccer. Like,
Mm,
obviously, the end goal for me is sort of play Division One soccer, and
mm,
so it's okay. What teams do I need to make now? That's the next step down. Okay, I need to make this club team. I need to make varsity,
yeah,
and then next it's well, first, how do I become the best player on my current team so I'm considered for these teams, and then it's okay, how much do I need to practice? What do I need to practice? And then it ends up boiling down to my current goals being, okay, I need to practice this many times a week for this amount of time and do this. And then like I have all of these short-term goals that I'm setting, even if they're not concrete, I have them in my mind and I try
yeah,
to follow them. And then
Hmm.
I also have the goal of let me make this team in June and then this team in August,
Yeah.
and just all of these goals, and then eventually building towards a bigger goal. So yeah,
Actually, that concept reminds me of a book that you might enjoy. It's called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big. And he kind of takes a countercultural approach to goal setting and says you should have a system rather than a goal. So, like
yeah,
the common analogy he used was for going to the gym, which a lot of people struggle with. And he said, instead of saying, I'm going to go to the gym, I'm going to work out this much, I'm going to lose this much weight, which are all goals, he said,
yeah,
just go to the gym every day, even if you don't work out. Put
just
your
focus on that.
exercise
Yeah,
clothes on, walk in the door, even if you're terribly sick, you can go right back home. But you go in the gym every day, and that
yeah,
system leads to you actually, well, I'm here, I might as well step on a treadmill, and then you're off.
yeah, yeah. I love that idea of process-based goals rather than outcome-based
Yeah,
goals.
I think
Even
there's benefits to both, but I think like the outcome can be like an
yeah,
inspirational goal, like playing Division One soccer is a huge one that you can put out
yeah,
there as a signpost in front of you that I'm running toward this. But then process goals are like, yeah, I need to train 4 days a week and work on these specific skills and level all that up.
yeah. So I was wondering, is there anyone else I should talk to on this topic?
Yeah, actually, I just met someone who I think is going to be a good brainstorm partner of mine. I met them through a client. His name is Ben Chase, and he
Hmm.
runs High Perception Hoops out of Newburyport, Mass. And had a great phone conversation with him. Found out that we have a mentor in common that we both have borrowed ideas from about basketball.
Yeah.
And I also found out he's actually teaching sports psychology classes at
Hmm.
UNH. And anyway, he came to mind first. Somebody you might have a great time interviewing and get his
Yeah.
sports psychology perspective on some of these questions.
Yeah, maybe I'll try to reach out to him for an interview.
Yeah, I can certainly share contact info with you and get you guys connected.
Yeah. Do you have any closing thoughts before we go?
No, I think this was a great discussion. I really like having my brain opened up with new and unique questions. So
Yeah, thank you so much. This really helps.
yeah, thanks for joining me.
All right. See
Have a
ya.
good
You too.
Bye.
Bye.